The sound of leather striking flesh echoed through the small adobe house on the edge of Superior, Arizona. And Natalie Lawson knew she had finally pushed her brother too far. Blood trickled from her split lip as she crumpled against the rough wooden floor, her cheek already swelling from where Thomas's calloused hand had connected with her face. It was October 1883, and the autumn heat still clung to the desert air, making the small room feel even more suffocating as her brother stood over her, his chest heaving with rage. "You ungrateful little fool," Thomas spat, his face red with anger. "Harold Bentley is offering you everything. A house, security, a future. And you dare refuse him." Natalie's hands trembled as she pushed herself up to her knees, tasting copper on her tongue. At 22 years old, she had endured many things since their parents died 3 years ago, leaving Thomas as her guardian. But she had never seen him this furious, this violent. Harold Bentley was Thomas's closest friend, a wealthy mine owner in his late 40s with 2 previous wives buried in the cemetery on the hill. The thought of becoming his third made Natalie's stomach turn. "I will not marry him," she whispered, her voice barely audible but defiant. "I do not love him, Thomas. I cannot." The second blow came faster than the first. Thomas grabbed her by the hair, yanking her head back as his fist connected with her ribs. She cried out, the pain sharp and blinding, but something in her refused to beg. Perhaps it was pride, or perhaps it was the knowledge that begging would change nothing. Thomas had made his decision, and in his mind, her feelings were irrelevant compared to the business partnership and financial security Harold's friendship provided. "You will marry him," Thomas growled, releasing her hair so she fell forward. "Harold is coming for your answer tomorrow evening. And you will say yes, Natalie, or I swear I will make you regret every day of your miserable existence." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Natalie lay on the floor, each breath sending fresh waves of pain through her chest. Tears streamed down her face, but she forced herself to think clearly. She could not stay here. She could not marry Harold Bentley, but where could she go? She had no money, no relatives, nowhere to run in this harsh desert territory. As darkness fell, Natalie carefully pulled herself up and gathered what little she owned. A few dresses, her mother's locket, the Bible that had belonged to her father. Her ribs screamed in protest with every movement, but she refused to stop. Thomas had gone to the saloon, as he did most nights, which gave her a window of opportunity. She did not have a plan beyond leaving, but anything was better than remaining here. The night air was cool against her bruised face as she slipped out the back door. Superior was a small mining town nestled in the foothills, surrounded by rocky terrain and desert scrubland. The main street was lit by oil lamps, and she could hear raucous laughter from the saloon where her brother was likely drinking away his anger. She pulled her shawl tight around her shoulders and started walking, not toward town but away from it, toward the wilderness beyond. She had not gone far when she heard hoofbeats behind her. Panic seized her chest. Had Thomas discovered her absence already? She stumbled off the path, trying to hide behind a cluster of mesquite trees, but the rider had already seen her. "Easy there," a deep voice called out. "I do not mean any harm." Natalie pressed herself against a tree trunk, her heart hammering. The rider dismounted, leading his horse slowly toward her hiding place. As he came closer, the moonlight revealed a tall man in his mid-20s, wearing worn leather chaps and a dusty brown hat. His face was weathered from the sun, with a strong jaw shadowed by a few days of stubble. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, dark and concerned as they took in her disheveled appearance. "Madam, are you injured?" he asked, his voice gentle now. "I can see you are favoring your side." "Please," Natalie said, her voice breaking, Please just let me go, I have to keep moving." The cowboy stopped, holding up his hands to show he meant no threat. "My name is Kane Morrison. I work at the Triple M Ranch about 5 miles north of here. I was riding back from town when I saw you. If someone has hurt you, I can help." Natalie wanted to trust him, but fear and pain clouded her judgment. "No one can help me," she whispered. "Please just forget you saw me." Kane's expression darkened as he studied her face, and she knew he could see the bruises even in the dim light. "Did a man do this to you?" When she did not answer, he took a careful step closer. "Listen, I do not know your circumstances, but a lady alone in the desert at night is in danger. There are rattlesnakes, coyotes, and worse. At least let me take you somewhere safe." "There is nowhere safe," Natalie said, but even as the words left her mouth, she felt herself swaying. The adrenaline that had carried her this far was fading, leaving only pain and exhaustion in its wake. Kane moved quickly, catching her before she fell. His arms were strong and steady, and for the first time in hours, Natalie felt something other than fear. "I have got you," he murmured. "I will not let anyone hurt you. I give you my word." She did not have the strength to protest as he lifted her carefully onto his horse, then swung up behind her. His arm encircled her waist, holding her secure against his chest as they began to ride. She should have been afraid, should have questioned where he was taking her, but something in his gentle manner made her feel protected rather than threatened. "What is your name?" Kane asked softly as they rode through the darkness. "Natalie," she whispered. "Natalie Lawson." She felt him tense slightly behind her. "Thomas Lawson's sister," her stomach dropped. "You know my brother." "I have seen him around town," Kane said carefully. "He runs the dry goods store on Main Street." "Did he do this to you, Natalie?" Fresh tears burned her eyes. "He wants me to marry his friend, Harold Bentley. I refused and he—" She did not need to finish. Kane's arm tightened protectively around her, though he was careful not to hurt her injured ribs. "Harold Bentley," he said, his voice hard with disgust. "I've heard stories about that man, about his previous wives. You were right to refuse him." "But Thomas will not accept my refusal," Natalie said. "He said Harold is coming tomorrow for my answer, and if I do not say yes, Thomas will." She shuddered, unable to complete the thought. "Then you will not go back," Kane said firmly. "I am taking you to the ranch. Mrs. Sarah McGraw owns it, and she is a fair and decent woman. She will give you shelter, and I will make sure your brother does not find you. But he will come looking," Natalie protested weakly. "He will search everywhere." "Let him try," Kane said, and there was steel in his voice now. "He will have to go through me first, and I promise you, Natalie, that man will never lay a hand on you again." The conviction in his words stirred something deep in Natalie's chest. She barely knew this man, yet he was willing to stand between her and her brother, to protect her when she had nowhere else to turn. She let herself lean back against him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat through his shirt. And for the first time that night, she felt a glimmer of hope. The Triple M Ranch emerged from the darkness like an oasis. Several buildings clustered around a main house, with corrals and a large barn visible in the moonlight. Kane guided his horse to the main house and dismounted, then carefully helped Natalie down. Her legs trembled as her feet touched the ground, and he kept a steadying hand on her arm. "Wait here," he said gently, helping her sit on the porch steps. "I will wake Mrs. McGraw." Natalie watched as he knocked on the door, then waited patiently. After a few moments, a lamp flickered to life inside, and the door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s wearing a nightgown and robe, her gray streaked hair in a long braid over her shoulder. "Kane Morrison, what on earth brings you here at this hour?" she asked, but her voice held no anger, only curiosity. "I found a woman in trouble, Mrs. McGraw," Kane said, gesturing toward Natalie. She needs help, and I did not know where else to bring her." Sarah McGraw's eyes widened as she caught sight of Natalie's bruised face. She hurried down the steps, her expression transforming from confusion to maternal concern. "Oh, you poor dear. Come inside immediately. Kane, fetch some water and clean cloths from the kitchen." Within minutes, Natalie found herself sitting in a warm, comfortable parlor while Mrs. McGraw gently cleaned the blood from her face. The older woman worked with practiced efficiency, asking no questions as she tended to the injuries. Kane returned with the requested supplies, then stood awkwardly near the doorway, clearly wanting to help but unsure what to do. "Tell me what happened, child," Mrs. McGraw said finally, her voice kind but firm. Natalie told her everything. About her parents' deaths, about Thomas becoming her guardian, about Harold Bentley's proposal and her refusal, about the beating. She left nothing out, and with each word she saw Mrs. McGraw's expression grow darker. When she finished, the older woman sat back, her lips pressed into a thin line. "That brother of yours should be horsewhipped," she declared. "And Harold Bentley is a snake in human form. Everyone in this territory knows what happened to his previous wives, though nothing was ever proven." She looked at Natalie with determination. "You will stay here, dear. I have a room in the house you can use, and I could use help with the household tasks. Consider it employment if it makes you feel better about accepting my charity." "I do not want to impose," Natalie began, but Mrs. McGraw waved her hand dismissively. "Nonsense. A woman should not have to endure what you have been through. You will be safe here." She glanced at Kane, who was still watching Natalie with concern. "And I suspect young Kane here will make sure of it." Kane straightened, his jaw set with determination. "Yes, madam. I give you my word no harm will come to Natalie while I draw breath." Mrs. McGraw smiled knowingly. "I am sure it will not. Now it is late and we all need rest. Natalie, let me show you to your room. Kane, you should get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a difficult day." As Mrs. McGraw led Natalie upstairs, the younger woman glanced back at Kane. He met her eyes and something passed between them, unspoken but powerful. In the space of a few hours, this stranger had become her protector, her champion. She did not understand why he cared so much, but she was grateful beyond words. The room Mrs. McGraw showed her was simple but clean, with a comfortable bed and a window overlooking the corrals. After the older woman left her alone, Natalie collapsed onto the bed, every muscle in her body aching. But despite the pain, despite the fear of what tomorrow would bring, she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt safe. The morning sun streaming through the window woke Natalie. For a moment she forgot where she was, then everything came rushing back. The beating, Kane finding her, the ranch. She sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in her ribs, and looked down at herself. She was still wearing yesterday's dress, now dusty and torn. Someone had draped a quilt over her during the night. A soft knock at the door made her tense. "It is just me, dear," Mrs. McGraw's voice called. "May I come in?" "Yes, of course," Natalie said. Mrs. McGraw entered carrying a tray with breakfast and a basin of warm water. "I thought you might like to freshen up and eat before coming downstairs. I have also brought you some clothes that should fit. They belonged to my daughter before she married and moved to California." "You are too kind," Natalie said, her throat tight with emotion. "I do not know how to thank you." "You can thank me by taking care of yourself and not letting that brother of yours destroy your spirit," Mrs. McGraw replied briskly. "Now eat. You need your strength. And when you are ready, come down to the kitchen. We have things to discuss." After Mrs. McGraw left, Natalie ate the simple breakfast of eggs and bread, then washed and changed into the borrowed dress. It was a soft blue cotton, worn but clean and comfortable. Looking at herself in the small mirror above the washstand, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Her left eye was swollen, her cheek purple with bruising, her lip split. But there was something different in her eyes now. Not just fear, but determination. Downstairs, she found Mrs. McGraw and Kane sitting at the kitchen table. They both looked up as she entered, and Kane immediately stood, his eyes sweeping over her with concern. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better," Natalie said honestly. "Still sore, but better." "Sit down, dear," Mrs. McGraw said, pouring her a cup of coffee. "We have been discussing your situation." Natalie sat, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I assume my brother will come looking for me." "He will," Kane confirmed. "Which is why I rode into town early this morning to get ahead of any search. I spoke with Sheriff Morrison, who happens to be my uncle. He knows about what happened." "Your uncle is the sheriff?" Natalie asked, relief flooding through her. Kane nodded. "I told him everything you told us last night. He said that while what your brother did is reprehensible, proving assault within a family is difficult, especially when you are still legally under his guardianship until you marry or reach 25. Natalie's heart sank. "So I have no legal protection?" "Not exactly," Kane said. "Sheriff Morrison suggested that if you were to marry, you would no longer be under your brother's authority. You would have the legal right to live wherever you choose." "But I have no prospects for marriage," Natalie said bitterly. "And I will not marry Harold Bentley, even if it means living in fear for the next 3 years. Mrs. McGraw and Kane exchanged a look. "There might be another option," the older woman said carefully. "Kane has made a suggestion, though I want you to know there is absolutely no pressure. You are welcome to stay here regardless of your decision." Natalie looked at Kane, confused. He met her eyes, and she saw a mixture of determination and nervousness in his expression. "I would like to offer you my protection through marriage," Kane said. "It would be in name only, if that is your wish. A legal arrangement to free you from your brother's authority. You would have your own room, your own life. I would not expect anything from you except the legal formality of being my wife." Natalie stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "You would marry me, but you do not even know me." "I know enough," Kane said firmly. "I know you are brave enough to refuse a marriage that would have made you miserable. I know you would rather face the desert at night than stay with someone who hurts you, and I know that no woman deserves what your brother did to you." He leaned forward, his eyes earnest. "I am not asking you to love me, Natalie. I am offering you freedom and protection. What you do with that freedom is entirely up to you." "But what would you gain from such an arrangement?" Natalie asked, searching his face for any sign of ulterior motives. Kane smiled slightly. "Peace of mind, knowing I helped someone who needed it. And perhaps a friend, if you would consider me such." Mrs. McGraw spoke up. "Kane is a good man, Natalie. I have known him for 5 years, and he has never been anything but honorable. His offer is genuine, but this is your choice and yours alone." Natalie's mind raced. Marriage to Kane Morrison would solve her immediate problem, freeing her from both Thomas's authority and Harold's pursuit. But could she trust this man she had known for less than a day? Then again, what other option did she have? She could not hide at the ranch forever, and Thomas would never stop searching for her unless she was legally beyond his reach. "If I agree," she said slowly, "you truly would not expect anything from me. It would be a marriage in name only." "You have my word," Kane said solemnly. "Whatever might develop between us in the future would be entirely your choice. I would never force or expect anything from you." Natalie took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. But as she looked at Kane's sincere face, at the genuine concern in his eyes, she felt that same inexplicable trust she had felt the night before. "Then yes," she said quietly, I accept your offer. Kane's expression flooded with relief. Thank you for trusting me. I promise I will not let you down. We should move quickly, Mrs. McGraw said, ever practical. If Thomas comes looking before the marriage is official, he could cause trouble. The preacher in town, Reverend Walsh, is a reasonable man. If we explain the circumstances, I believe he would be willing to perform the ceremony today. Everything moved swiftly after that. Mrs. McGraw insisted Natalie rest while she and Kane made arrangements. By early afternoon, they were ready to head into town. Kane saddled his horse as well as a gentle mare named Daisy for Natalie to ride. Despite her inexperience with horses, he was patient, showing her how to sit in the saddle and handle the reins. "You are doing well," he encouraged as they started down the road toward Superior, with Mrs. McGraw driving her wagon alongside them. "Daisy is as calm as they come. She will take care of you." The ride into town filled Natalie with anxiety. What if they encountered Thomas? What if Harold Bentley saw them? But Kane seemed to sense her fear, keeping his horse close to hers, his presence reassuring. Superior was bustling with afternoon activity when they arrived. Kane led them down a side street to avoid the main thoroughfare, heading directly to the small white church at the edge of town. Reverend Walsh was in the garden behind the church, tending to vegetables when they arrived. He was an elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor, and when Mrs. McGraw explained the situation, his expression turned sympathetic. "That poor child," he said, looking at Natalie's bruised face. "Yes, I will perform the ceremony. Any man who would beat his sister for refusing an unwanted marriage deserves no respect. Come inside." The church interior was cool and peaceful, with afternoon light filtering through simple windows. Reverend Walsh gathered them before the altar with Mrs. McGraw standing as witness. As he began the ceremony, Natalie felt surreal, as though she were watching this happen to someone else. Just yesterday morning, she had been trapped in her brother's house, facing a forced marriage to a man she despised. Now she was standing before an altar with a near stranger, entering into a different marriage entirely. But as Kane took her hand, his touch warm and steady, she felt grounded again. When it came time for the vows, he spoke them clearly and sincerely, his eyes never leaving hers. And when she repeated her own vows, her voice was stronger than she expected. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Walsh said with a smile. "Kane, you may kiss your bride if she is willing." Kane looked at Natalie, silently asking permission. She nodded slightly, and he leaned down, pressing the gentlest of kisses to her forehead, carefully avoiding her injured lip. It was such a tender gesture, so respectful of her pain, that Natalie felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. They signed the marriage certificate, making it official, and Reverend Walsh promised to file the paperwork with the county immediately. As they left the church, Natalie felt lighter somehow despite everything. She was no longer Natalie Lawson, trapped under her brother's authority. She was Natalie Morrison, a married woman with the legal right to her own choices, but their respite was short-lived. As they walked toward where the horses were tethered, a familiar voice called out. "Natalie," she froze, her blood running cold. Thomas stood in the street, his face red with fury, with Harold Bentley beside him. Both men started toward them, and Natalie instinctively moved closer to Kane. Kane stepped in front of her, his body a wall of protection. "That is close enough," he said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable warning. "Get out of my way," Thomas snarled. "That is my sister, and she is coming home with me." "No, she is not," Kane replied. "Natalie is my wife now, legally married as of about 10 minutes ago. She is no longer under your authority." Thomas's face went from red to purple. You what? Natalie, you married this cowhand rather than Harold. Have you lost your mind? Before Natalie could respond, Harold Bentley stepped forward. He was a heavy-set man with thinning hair and cold eyes that made Natalie's skin crawl. This is unacceptable. We had an arrangement, Thomas. Your sister was promised to me. I was never promised to you, Natalie said, finding her voice. She stepped out from behind Kane, though she stayed close to his side. I refused your proposal, and I refuse it now. I have made my choice. A choice? Thomas spat. You have ruined everything. You know what kind of opportunities Harold was offering us, what kind of security. Security for you, perhaps, Natalie said, her anger rising above her fear. But what about me, Thomas? What about what I want? You beat me for daring to have an opinion about my own life. You deserved it for your disobedience, Thomas shot back, and Kane's entire body tensed. Say that again, Kane said quietly, his tone deadly calm. Say one more time that she deserved to be beaten and see what happens. Sheriff Morrison appeared then, having heard the commotion. What is going on here? He asked, though his eyes were already on his nephew, assessing the situation. This man married my sister without my permission, Thomas declared. The marriage should be annulled. The marriage is legal, Sheriff Morrison said. Natalie is of age to consent, and I have already confirmed with Reverend Walsh that the ceremony was proper. As a married woman, she is no longer under your guardianship, Thomas. You have no legal claim to her. This is not over, Thomas said, his voice shaking with rage. Natalie, when this sham of a marriage falls apart, do not come crying to me. I would never, Natalie said coldly. Goodbye, Thomas. She turned and walked to where Daisy was tied, her hands shaking but her head held high. Kane followed, helping her mount, then swung onto his own horse. As they rode away with Mrs. McGraw, Natalie did not look back. She did not want to see her brother's face, did not want to give him the satisfaction of knowing how frightened she still was. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Mrs. McGraw drove her wagon ahead, giving Kane and Natalie space. Finally, Kane spoke. You were very brave back there. I was terrified, Natalie admitted. Brave and terrified are not mutually exclusive, Kane said with a slight smile. You stood up to him despite your fear. That takes real courage. Thank you for being there, Natalie said softly, for protecting me. I do not know what I would have done if you had not found me last night. I am glad I was there, Kane said. And I meant what I said, Natalie. I will make sure your brother never touches you again. You are safe now. Safe. It was such a simple word, but it meant everything. As they rode through the desert landscape, the sun beginning to set and paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Natalie felt the truth of it settling into her bones. She was safe. And somehow, impossibly, she was married to a man she barely knew but was beginning to trust in ways she never thought possible. The days that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. True to his word, Kane gave Natalie space and independence. She kept the room Mrs. McGraw had given her the first night, while Kane slept in the bunkhouse with the other ranch hands. During the day, Natalie helped Mrs. McGraw with household tasks, learning to cook for the ranch hands, tend the vegetable garden, and manage the myriad details that kept a ranch running smoothly. Kane was often out working with the cattle or repairing fences, but in the evenings, he would seek Natalie out. At first, their conversations were brief and somewhat awkward, two strangers learning to be comfortable around each other. But gradually, as days turned into weeks, something shifted. Natalie learned that Kane had come to Arizona from Texas 5 years ago, seeking work after his father's death left him without family ties. He was 26, skilled with horses and cattle, and had a quiet strength that drew people to him. He loved the desert landscape despite its harshness. found peace in the wide open spaces and endless sky. In turn, Kane learned about Natalie's life before her parents died. How her mother had taught her to read and write, how her father had owned a small bookshop in Tucson before illness forced them to move to Superior. How Thomas had been different then, less bitter and controlling. She told him about her love of books, about the stories that had given her escape during difficult times. One evening, about 3 weeks after their marriage, Kane arrived at the main house carrying a package wrapped in brown paper. He found Natalie on the porch, watching the sunset, and sat down beside her. "I have something for you," he said, handing her the package. Natalie unwrapped it carefully to find 3 books. They were not new, the covers worn from previous owners, but they were books she had never read. She looked up at Kane, touched beyond words. "I remembered you saying you loved to read," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "The general store in town had these. I thought you might enjoy them." "Kane, this is wonderful," Natalie said, running her fingers over the covers. "Thank you. This is the kindest gift anyone has given me in years." "I am glad you like them," he said, and the smile that lit his face made Natalie's heart skip in an unfamiliar way. She was beginning to see Kane not just as her protector, but as a man. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle way he handled the horses, his quiet competence at everything he did. She noticed how he always made sure she had eaten before he did, how he would slow his walking pace to match hers when they talked, how he listened to her opinions as though they mattered. It frightened her, these growing feelings. She had not expected them, had not wanted them. Their marriage was supposed to be a practical arrangement, nothing more. But her heart seemed to have other ideas. Kane was having similar struggles. He had offered marriage to Natalie out of a genuine desire to help, expecting nothing in return. But living near her, talking with her, seeing her smile begin to return as her bruises faded, he found himself falling in ways he had not anticipated. He loved her quick mind, her resilience, her kindness toward Mrs. McGraw and the ranch hands. He loved the way she threw herself into learning new tasks, never complaining about the hard work. He loved her. He realized one day while watching her laugh at something Mrs. McGraw said, and the realization terrified him. He had promised her a marriage in name only. He had given his word not to expect anything from her. The last thing he wanted was to pressure her or make her uncomfortable. So he kept his feelings carefully hidden, determined to honor his promise even if it meant living with this ache in his chest. It was Mrs. McGraw who finally intervened. She was an observant woman, and she had not missed the way Kane and Natalie looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. One afternoon, when Natalie had gone to gather eggs, Mrs. McGraw cornered Kane in the barn. "You are in love with her," she said bluntly. Kane nearly dropped the saddle he was carrying. "Mrs. McGraw, do not bother denying it," she said, waving her hand. "I have eyes, and unless I am very much mistaken, she has feelings for you too. So why are you both tiptoeing around each other like frightened rabbits?" "I gave her my word," Kane said quietly. "I promised the marriage would be in name only unless she wanted otherwise. I will not break that promise." "You noble fool," Mrs. McGraw said, but her tone was fond. "Has it occurred to you that she might want otherwise but is too afraid to say so? That girl was beaten for refusing one man's advances. She is not going to be the first to suggest romance with another, even if she wants it." "But what if I am wrong?" Kane said. "What if I make her uncomfortable and ruin the friendship we have built? I could not bear to lose her trust." "Then talk to her," Mrs. McGraw said firmly. "Be honest about your feelings and see what she says. You might be surprised." Kane thought about Mrs. McGraw's words for the rest of the day. That evening he found Natalie in her usual spot on the porch, one of the books he had given her open in her lap. The setting sun cast a golden glow over her face, and she had never looked more beautiful. "May I sit?" he asked. "Of course," Natalie said, marking her place and setting the book aside. "I was hoping you would come by. I wanted to talk to you about something." "Funny," Kane said, sitting beside her. "I wanted to talk to you too. You go first." Natalie took a deep breath. "Kane, I know our marriage was meant to be a practical arrangement, a way to free me from Thomas's authority, and I will always be grateful to you for that. But these past weeks, getting to know you, spending time with you." She paused, gathering courage. "I find myself feeling things I did not expect to feel, and I do not know what to do about it." Kane's heart began to race. "What kind of things?" "I care about you," Natalie said softly, her cheeks flushing. "More than I should, perhaps, given our arrangement. When you are away during the day, I find myself watching for your return. When we talk, I wish the conversation would never end. And I know I have no right to feel this way, that you offered me marriage out of kindness, not because you wanted a real wife, but I cannot seem to help it." Kane reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. "Natalie, I have been struggling with the same feelings. I did not expect to fall in love with you, but I have, completely and irrevocably." Natalie's eyes widened. "You love me?" "Yes," Kane said simply. "I love you. I have been trying to hide it because I did not want to pressure you or make you feel obligated. But the truth is, you have become the most important person in my life. If you want this marriage to remain in name only, I will respect that. But if you want more, if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, then I am yours, completely." Tears filled Natalie's eyes, but they were happy tears. "I want more," she whispered. "I want a real marriage, Kane, with you." Kane's answering smile was radiant. He stood, gently pulling her to her feet, then cupped her face with both hands, careful of the faded bruises that still marked her skin. "May I kiss you, properly this time?" "Yes," Natalie breathed. The kiss was everything their wedding kiss had not been. Slow and sweet, full of promise and emotion. Natalie's arms wrapped around Kane's neck, and she felt safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I love you," Natalie said, the words feeling right and true. "I do not fully understand how it happened so quickly, but I do." "Sometimes the heart knows things the mind has not caught up to yet," Kane said, pulling her close. "And I am not going to question it. I am just grateful." That night marked a turning point in their relationship. Kane moved into the main house, into the room that connected to Natalie's through a shared door. They took things slowly, both aware that Natalie's past trauma meant she needed time and patience. But the love between them grew stronger with each passing day. Mrs. McGraw watched their courtship, for that is what it was, despite them already being married, with satisfaction. She saw the way Kane made Natalie laugh, the way Natalie's eyes followed Kane wherever he went. She saw them growing together, learning each other, building something real and lasting. 2 months after their wedding, trouble arrived in the form of Thomas and Harold Bentley. They rode up to the ranch one afternoon when Kane was out with the cattle. Natalie was hanging laundry when she heard the horses and looked up to see her brother dismounting. Her first instinct was fear, but then she straightened her spine. She was not the same frightened girl who had fled into the desert. She was stronger now, loved and protected. "What do you want, Thomas?" she asked coldly. "I want to talk to my sister," Thomas said, but there was something different in his manner. He looked older, more tired. "Please, Natalie, just hear me out." Mrs. McGraw appeared on the porch, shotgun in hand. "You have 1 minute before I fill you with buckshot, Thomas Lawson. I have heard what you did to this girl." Thomas held up his hands. "I am not here to cause trouble. Harold has returned to California. He gave up on the marriage idea when it became clear Natalie was not going to change her mind. Good riddance, Natalie said. I was wrong, Thomas said, and the admission seemed to cost him. What I did to you was unforgivable. I let greed and ambition cloud my judgment. Harold offered a business partnership that would have made me wealthy, and I was willing to sacrifice your happiness for it. I am ashamed. Natalie stared at her brother, hardly believing what she was hearing. Why are you telling me this now? Because I have had time to think, Thomas said. Time to realize what kind of man I became after mother and father died. I was so focused on survival, on security, that I lost sight of what truly mattered. You are my sister, and I should have protected you, not hurt you. He looked at the ground. I know you can never forgive me. I do not deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I am sorry, truly sorry. Natalie felt tears on her cheeks. Part of her wanted to rage at him, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he had caused her. But another part, the part that remembered the brother he used to be before grief and fear changed him, felt a stirring of compassion. I appreciate your apology, she said carefully. But sorry does not erase what you did, Thomas. You beat me. You tried to force me into marriage with a man who terrified me. Those are not things I can simply forgive and forget. I know, Thomas said. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am just asking for a chance to be better. To maybe, someday, earn back a small piece of your trust. Before Natalie could respond, Kane came riding up fast, clearly having been alerted to the visitors. He dismounted in one fluid motion, positioning himself between Natalie and Thomas. Is everything all right? He asked Natalie, his eyes never leaving Thomas. It is all right, Natalie said, touching Kane's arm. Thomas came to apologize. Kane looked at Thomas with cold assessment. Apologies are easy. Changed behavior is harder. If you truly want to make amends, leave Natalie alone. Let her build the life she wants without your interference. That is the only way you can show you have changed. I understand, Thomas said. He looked at Natalie one more time. I hope you are happy, Natalie. Truly, you deserve happiness. He mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Natalie shaking. Kane immediately wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Are you all right? He murmured into her hair. I think so, Natalie said. It was just unexpected. I never thought he would apologize. Do you believe him? Kane asked. Natalie thought about it. I think he meant it, but meaning it and actually changing are different things. I cannot trust him again, not after what he did. But maybe someday, if he proves himself through actions rather than words, we can have some kind of relationship. Not what we had before, but something. That is very generous of you, Kane said. Or very foolish, Natalie replied with a sad smile. But he is the only family I have left. I suppose some small part of me does not want to completely close that door. Then we will leave it open a crack, Kane said. But if he ever tries to hurt you again, family or not, I will make him regret it. My fierce protector, Natalie said, rising on her toes to kiss him. What did I do to deserve you? I ask myself the same question every day, Kane said. What did I do to deserve you? As winter approached, bringing cooler temperatures to the Arizona desert, Kane and Natalie's marriage deepened into something truly beautiful. They were no longer two strangers bound by a legal document, but partners in every sense of the word. They worked side by side during the day and fell asleep in each other's arms at night. They talked about everything, dreams and fears, hopes for the future. One evening in December, as they sat by the fire in the main house, Kane brought up something he had been thinking about. I have been saving money, he said. Not much, but some. Mrs. McGraw has been very generous with my wages, and I have been putting aside what I can. What are you saving for? Natalie asked, looking up from the sock she was mending. I want to buy us a piece of land, Kane said. Nothing big, just enough for a small house and maybe a few head of cattle. I thought we could start our own place, build something that is truly ours." Natalie's eyes lit up. "Kane, that sounds wonderful, but where would we find such land?" "There is a parcel about 10 miles north of here," Kane said. "The owner is willing to sell cheap because there is no water source on it yet, but I could dig a well. It would be hard work, but in a few years we could have something real." "I love that idea," Natalie said, setting aside her mending to move closer to him. "Building something together, creating our own home. When can we start?" Kane laughed, pulling her onto his lap. "We would need to save more first. Maybe by next spring we could purchase the land and start building. In the meantime, I am sure Mrs. McGraw will not mind us staying here." "I will talk to her about taking on more work," Natalie said. "Maybe I could sew for people in town or bake goods to sell. Whatever we can do to save faster." "We will do it together," Kane said, kissing her forehead. "Everything we do together." The winter months passed in contentment and hard work. Natalie did indeed start sewing and baking, selling her goods in town and carefully saving every penny. Kane took on extra jobs when available, doing handyman work for neighboring ranches. Mrs. McGraw, understanding their goal, gave them both raises and expressed how proud she was of their determination. By February, they had saved enough to purchase the land. Kane signed the deed with trembling hands, barely able to believe he now owned property. Natalie cried happy tears as they stood on their parcel, looking out at the scrubby desert landscape and seeing not what was, but what would be. "Here," Natalie said, pointing to a slight rise in the terrain. "This is where the house should be. We will be able to see the sunrise from the front windows. And we will dig the well here," Kane said, marking a spot with his boot. "Close enough to the house for convenience, but not so close that seepage could be a problem." They spent every spare moment on their land. Kane began digging the well while Natalie cleared brush and marked out where the garden would go. Other ranch hands from the Triple M came to help on their days off, and slowly the well took shape. When they finally hit water, everyone cheered. It was sweet and clear, and Natalie laughed with joy as Kane spun her around. Construction on the house began in March. It was a simple structure, just 4 rooms, but every board and nail represented their labor and love. Kane proved to be a skilled carpenter, and Natalie learned quickly, becoming adept at measuring and holding beams in place while he hammered. By summer, the frame was complete, and by fall they had a roof and walls. Mrs. McGraw threw them a party to celebrate, inviting everyone in the area to help furnish the new house. People brought handmade quilts, dishes, tools, and furniture. Sheriff Morrison, Kane's uncle, brought a rocking chair he had carved himself. Even Reverend Walsh came, blessing the house and expressing his joy at seeing the marriage he had officiated turn into such a beautiful partnership. The one person conspicuously absent was Thomas. He had kept his distance since that day at the ranch, though Natalie had heard through town gossip that he had sold his store and was working as a clerk at the mining office. She did not seek him out, but neither did she close her heart entirely to the possibility of eventual reconciliation. On a warm October evening in 1884, exactly 1 year after Thomas had beaten her and Kane had found her in the desert, Natalie and Kane moved into their home. They stood on the front porch, watching the sun set over the land they now owned, and Natalie felt a profound sense of peace. "A year ago I thought my life was over," she said softly. "I thought I had no options, no hope, no future, and now look at us. We have a home, Kane, a real home." "We do," Kane agreed, wrapping his arms around her from behind, "and it is just the beginning. We have a whole life ahead of us, Natalie, a life we get to build together." "I love you," Natalie said, turning in his arms to face him. I never thought I could feel this way about anyone, so safe, so cherished, so completely happy. I love you too, Kane said, kissing her deeply. You are my everything, Natalie Morrison. My wife, my partner, my best friend. I thank God every day that I was riding down that road the night I found you. Maybe it was fate, Natalie mused. Maybe everything that happened, as terrible as it was, led us to each other. Then I will be grateful for fate, Kane said. Though I will never be grateful for the pain you endured, but I promise you, for the rest of my life, I will do everything in my power to fill your days with happiness. He kept that promise. The years that followed were filled with hard work and simple joys. They expanded their cattle herd slowly but steadily. Natalie's garden flourished, providing vegetables they sold in town. They made friends with their neighbors and became respected members of the superior community. In the spring of 1886, Natalie discovered she was pregnant. Kane's joy was boundless, though he immediately became overly protective, insisting she rest more and work less. Natalie found his concern endearing, even when it bordered on excessive. I am not made of glass, she told him one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from lifting a basket of laundry. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. But you are my wife, Kane said, taking the basket from her anyway. And I will not take any chances with your health or our child's. Their son was born in December, a healthy baby with Kane's dark hair and Natalie's blue eyes. They named him James after Kane's father, and both parents were instantly, utterly besotted. Kane would sit for hours holding his son, marveling at the tiny fingers and toes, singing soft lullabies he remembered from his own childhood. He is perfect, Kane whispered one night as they watched James sleep in his cradle. We made something perfect, Natalie. We did, Natalie agreed, leaning against Kane's shoulder. I never knew I could love someone this much. It is almost frightening how intense it is. I know, Kane said. Every time I look at him, I think about how different things could have been. If I had not been riding that road, if I had not stopped, if you had not trusted me, we would not have this. We would not have any of it. But we do have it, Natalie said firmly. We have everything, Kane, each other, our son, our home. We are blessed beyond measure. When James was 6 months old, Natalie received an unexpected visitor. She was hanging laundry while Kane worked in the fields and James napped in his cradle on the porch when she saw a lone rider approaching. She tensed, then recognized her brother. Thomas had changed in the 2 years since she had last seen him. He looked thinner, more careworn, but there was a gentleness in his eyes that had not been there before. He dismounted slowly, keeping his distance. "Hello, Natalie," he said quietly. "Thomas," she replied, her tone neutral. "What brings you here? I heard you had a baby," Thomas said. "I wanted to congratulate you and to bring this." He held out a small wooden toy, a horse carved with obvious care. "I made it myself, for my nephew, if you will accept it." Natalie looked at the toy, then at her brother. She saw genuine remorse in his face, a humility that had not been there during his last visit. "You carved this." "I have been learning woodworking," Thomas said. "It gives me something to do in the evenings, keeps my hands busy. I'm not very good yet, but I tried my best with this." Natalie took the toy, examining it. It was rough in places, but made with evident effort and care. "It is lovely," she said honestly. "James will enjoy it when he is a bit older. Thank you." "May I see him?" Thomas asked hesitantly. "Just a glimpse. I will not ask to hold him or anything." "I just want to see him." Natalie considered, then nodded. "He is on the porch, napping. You can look, but do not wake him." They walked to the porch together, and Thomas peered into the cradle. His expression softened as he looked at the sleeping baby. "He is beautiful, Natalie. He looks like you." "He has Kane's coloring," Natalie said. "But your features," Thomas said. He looked at her. "You seem happy. Truly happy, I am glad. I am, Natalie confirmed. Kane is a wonderful husband and father. We have built a good life together. I am sorry I was not a better brother to you, Thomas said. I do not expect you to forgive me, not after what I did. But I want you to know that I have thought about it every day for the past 2 years. About how I hurt you, how I failed you. If I could go back and change things, I would. Natalie studied her brother's face. She saw the sincerity there, the genuine regret. I appreciate your apology, Thomas, and I appreciate the effort you have made to give me space while trying to show you have changed. But trust is not something that can be rebuilt quickly. If you truly want a relationship with me, with my family, it will have to be earned slowly over time. I understand, Thomas said. I am willing to wait as long as it takes. If you will allow me, I would like to visit occasionally. Not often, just now and then, to show you that I am serious about being better. Maybe someday you will be able to forgive me. Maybe, Natalie said. But for now, let us just take things one day at a time. You can visit, but if I ever feel uncomfortable or unsafe, I will ask you to leave. That is more than fair, Thomas said. Thank you, Natalie, for giving me even this small chance. After Thomas left, Kane returned from the fields to find Natalie contemplative. She told him about the visit, showing him the carved horse. Kane examined it carefully. It is well made, he admitted. He put effort into it. Do you think I am making a mistake? Natalie asked. Allowing him back into my life, even in this small way, Kane pulled her close. I think you are showing incredible grace and strength. You are not forgetting what he did, but you are not closing the door entirely either. If he proves himself unworthy of your trust, we will handle it. But giving him a chance to try is not weakness, Natalie. It is courage. I am glad you understand, Natalie said. I do not want to be at odds with the only family I have left, but I will not tolerate any behavior that puts you or James at risk. And I will be watching him closely, Kane said. Always. Your safety and James's safety are my highest priorities. Thomas did visit, infrequently and always respectfully. He brought small gifts, always handmade, showing the effort he was putting into his woodworking hobby. He never stayed long and never asked for more than Natalie was willing to give. Slowly, over months and then years, the relationship between brother and sister began to heal, though it would never be what it once was. Some hurts go too deep for complete restoration, but forgiveness, Natalie learned, did not mean forgetting. It meant choosing not to let the past poison the present. In 1888, Natalie gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. She was a delicate baby with blonde hair and her father's dark eyes, and James, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his new sister. Kane continued to be the loving, protective husband and father he had always been, and their little ranch continued to prosper. By 1890, they had expanded their property, purchasing additional land from a neighbor who was moving back east. They now had a sizable herd of cattle and several horses. James, at 4 years old, was already showing an aptitude for ranch work, following his father everywhere and mimicking his movements. Rose, at 2, was a joyful child who loved the garden and would spend hours helping her mother tend the vegetables. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Kane took Natalie's hand. "You ever think about that night?" he asked. "The night I found you in the desert." "Sometimes," Natalie said. "It feels like a lifetime ago now, like it happened to a different person." "In a way it did," Kane said. "You are not the same frightened woman you were then. You have become so strong, so confident. I admire you more every day." "I had good reason to become strong," Natalie said, squeezing his hand. "I had you standing beside me, giving me the space to heal and the support to grow. I could not have done it without you, Kane." "We did it together," Kane said. Everything we have, everything we are, we built it together. And we will continue building it together, Natalie said. For the rest of our lives. Their life continued to unfold in beautiful simplicity. They had 2 more children, another son named William born in 1892 and a daughter named Margaret in 1894. Their house, once so new and empty, filled with the noise and chaos of children, with laughter and occasional tears, with the daily rhythms of family life. Mrs. McGraw remained a close friend until her death in 1895. Kane and Natalie were with her at the end, holding her hands as she passed peacefully in her sleep. She left the Triple M Ranch to Kane in her will, stating that he had been like a son to her, and she knew he would care for the land and the people who worked it with the same dedication she had. Kane was overwhelmed by the gift, and he and Natalie worked hard to honor Mrs. McGraw's legacy, running both ranches with fairness and compassion. Thomas never remarried. He continued his work at the mining office and his woodworking hobby, which eventually became more than a hobby. He began making furniture that was sought after throughout the territory, and his craftsmanship became well known. He remained a part of Natalie's life, a peripheral but constant presence. He was Uncle Thomas to her children, welcomed at family gatherings but never quite achieving the closeness he had once had with his sister. He seemed content with this arrangement, grateful for what he had been given, and no longer seeking more than Natalie was willing to offer. As the 19th century drew to a close and a new century dawned, Kane and Natalie looked back on their lives with satisfaction. They had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative. They had built a successful ranch, raised 4 wonderful children, and created a partnership that was the envy of everyone who knew them. On a warm October evening in 1900, exactly 17 years after the night Kane had found Natalie in the desert, they stood together on the porch of their home. Their children were grown now, or nearly so. James, at 14, was already a skilled rancher who worked alongside his father. Rose, at 12, had her mother's love of books and was talking about becoming a teacher. William, at 8, was fascinated by horses and spent every spare moment in the stables. And little Margaret, at 6, was showing signs of inheriting her Uncle Thomas's artistic talent, constantly drawing and painting. 17 years, Natalie said, leaning against Kane's shoulder. It seems impossible that so much time has passed. And yet, in some ways, it feels like just yesterday, Kane said, wrapping his arm around her waist. I remember every detail of that night, how frightened you were, how brave, how beautiful you looked in the moonlight, even bruised and hurting. I remember thinking you were either my salvation or another danger, Natalie said with a soft laugh. I was so scared, but something about you made me trust you anyway. I am glad you did, Kane said, because that trust became the foundation of everything we have built together. Trust and love and partnership, those are the things that have made our marriage strong. Do you ever regret it? Natalie asked. Taking on a damaged, frightened woman with nothing to offer but problems. Kane turned her to face him, his expression serious. Never, not for one single moment. You were not damaged, Natalie. You were hurt, yes, but never damaged. And as for having nothing to offer, you gave me everything. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just existing. You gave me love and partnership and joy. How could I ever regret that? Tears filled Natalie's eyes. Even after 17 years of marriage, Kane still had the power to move her with his words. I love you, she said simply. More now than I did on our wedding day, more than I did yesterday. Every day my love for you grows. And mine for you, Kane said, kissing her softly. Until my last breath, Natalie Morrison. I am yours. As they stood there, holding each other under the vast Arizona sky filled with stars, their children's laughter drifting from inside the house, Natalie thought about the journey that had brought them here. She thought about the pain she had endured, the fear that had nearly broken her, the desperate flight into the desert that could have ended so differently. She thought about the moment she had heard Kane's voice in the darkness, offering help when she had no hope left. And she thought about everything that had come after, the tentative trust that grew into love, the marriage that started as protection and became partnership, the children they had created together, the ranch they had built with their own hands, the life they had carved out of the harsh desert landscape through hard work and determination and unwavering commitment to each other. "What are you thinking about?" Kane asked, sensing her contemplation. "I am thinking that I would not change a single thing," Natalie said. "Not the pain, not the fear, not any of it, because it all led me to you, to this moment, to this life we have together. And this life, Kane Morrison, is more beautiful than anything I ever imagined." "Then we have succeeded," Kane said with a smile. "Because creating a beautiful life together was all I ever wanted from the moment I saw you in that desert. And here we are, 17 years later, still creating it together." They kissed again as the sun finished setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and pink. Inside the house, their children called out that dinner was ready, and with hands clasped together, Kane and Natalie walked inside to join their family. They had weathered everything life threw at them and come out stronger. They had turned a desperate arrangement into the deepest kind of love. They had built something lasting and true. In the years that followed, their love story became legend in Superior. People would point to Kane and Natalie Morrison as proof that real love existed, that partnership and respect could form the foundation of an enduring marriage. Their children grew and married and had children of their own, creating branches on the family tree that spread across Arizona and beyond. The ranch they built continued to thrive, passed down through generations. Thomas died peacefully in 1910, reconciled with his sister, though never quite forgiven for the hurt he had caused. Natalie attended his funeral and wept for the brother he could have been, the brother he had been before grief and greed changed him. But she also acknowledged the effort he had made in his later years to be better, and for that she was grateful. Kane and Natalie lived long lives, still deeply in love, still partners in every sense of the word. They saw the automobile come to Arizona, saw electricity reach even remote ranches, saw the world change in ways they could never have imagined. But through all the changes, their love remained constant. Kane died first in 1925 at the age of 67. He passed peacefully in his sleep with Natalie beside him, having lived a full and meaningful life. Natalie mourned him deeply, feeling as though half her heart had been ripped away. But she was surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her, and she found comfort in the legacy they had built together. She lived another 7 years, finally joining Kane in 1932 at the age of 71. Her last words were his name, spoken with love and anticipation, as though she could already see him waiting for her. They were buried side by side on the ranch they had built, under the endless Arizona sky they had both loved. Their gravestone bore simple words: Kane and Natalie Morrison. Partners in life, partners in love, together forever. And on warm October evenings, when the sun sets over the land they once tended with their own hands, people say you can still feel their presence. Not as ghosts, but as an enduring testament to the power of love, trust, and partnership. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can be found. That protection can turn to love, and love can build something lasting and beautiful. Their story, which began with violence and fear on a desperate night in the desert, became a love story for the ages. A tale of how one man's decision to help a stranger in distress led to a lifetime of happiness. How one woman's courage to trust again, despite every reason not to, opened the door to everything she had ever wanted. The house they built with their own hands still stands, now occupied by their great-great-grandchildren who continue the ranching tradition. The well Kane dug still provides sweet water. The land they worked so hard to purchase and improve still produces cattle and crops. And every generation that comes after them learns the story of how it all began. On that October night in 1883, when Kane Morrison found Natalie Lawson in the desert and changed both their lives forever. It is a story of protection becoming partnership, of arranged marriage becoming true love, of two wounded souls finding healing in each other. It is the story of how Kane made sure Thomas never touched Natalie again, how he gave her the space to become strong on her own terms, how he loved her with patience and respect until she was ready to love him back. And it is the story of how Natalie found the courage to trust again, to open her heart to love despite the pain in her past, to build a life that was everything she had been denied. Their love story proves that happy endings are not just found in fairy tales. Sometimes they happen in the harsh reality of the desert, to ordinary people who choose each other every single day. Kane and Natalie Morrison chose each other from that first night until their last breath, and in doing so, they created something extraordinary from what began as desperation and fear. They turned a rescue into a romance, protection into partnership, and a temporary arrangement into forever. And that, more than anything else, is what makes their story worth telling and retelling, generation after generation, as long as people believe in the transforming power of love.